We're sitting down for the third, and the truth of the matter is this is a guest that folks have heard. Kevin's become a great friend of mine and somebody that I actually could see myself doing lots of episodes with because we share. We'll find out today. We're actually going to start working together in some capacity. We kind of look at the world similarly but different. We're able to kind of challenge each other. And we just have a lot of really interesting conversations. And so it's really easy for me to want to have Kevin back on and just kind of chat kind of these updates as we kind of move through life. So Kevin, welcome back.
Thank you. My goal, Chris, is to become the Alec Baldwin of the Fort podcast. Alec Baldwin, I think, has the record for being on Saturday Night Live the most times. So this is my third visit here. So let me know if anybody's ahead of me, and we'll do another one next week.
People will listen to this and say very similar to like a Joe Rogan, Elon Musk. People just can't wait for that next time that Joe has Elon on, and folks can't wait for this episode. So
well, and I do live in Colorado, so I can break out the smokes just like Elon did.
I love it. We're gonna do a live one. We'll get the smokes when we do a live one.
Anytime, brother.
All right, you're in Colorado. Today we've got a very interesting conversation, but let's just kind of start out with, we just got through the holidays. You've got a lot of big things on your plate, and you said this has been one of your busiest months. What's been going on in your world?
Yeah. And actually I've told a few people last week is probably the busiest week I've had in many years. It was crazy. And just the sheer amount of stuff getting done. So just for all the listeners to kind of set the context, and we're going to talk a lot about my company today, but I'm the founder of a company called Swell. We're trying to reinvent consumer banking, and I'll talk a lot about exactly how we're doing that. But we incubated Swell inside of a bank that actually happened to be located in Hawaii, which was kind of fun. But we just spun the company out as of January 1st, and it's been, if you've ever been in the early stages of a startup, it's crazy. Chris, you've been there. I mean, this morning is actually a great example. I spent 2 hours this morning shooting a video for Swell. So we had like a full video and like lighting and everything at my house here. And then I was reviewing legal docs for our Series A financing. And so it's like everything under the sun, like getting HR set up, everything. It's just, it's fun, but it's also like, it takes a lot of energy.
And before we dive into it, give a little bit more context. You went to Central Pacific Bank, which is on the, it's not on the mainland. It's in Hawaii, but talk about what their motivation was originally and why that you're not a traditional banking kind of guy. What attracted you to them and that set the tone for you to kind of launch Swell out of them?
No, there was a method to the madness. So the history is, just quick on me. I mean, I've spent basically my entire career in financial services, mostly on the startup and fintech side of things. So was an early employee at one of the early online money lenders, a company now called Elevate, spent some time in the mortgage industry, and have worked in, across many different facets of consumer financial services. And it all started with an idea. Having been around financial services and banking for a long time, I know all the infinite ways it's screwed up. And I had an idea for something better. And as we all know, I mean, fintech is a hot category right now, so the timing was good too. But I basically brought this idea through a mutual connection to the CEO of this bank. And the fact that the bank was in Hawaii really doesn't have a whole lot to do with the story. That's just a fun thing to talk about. And it certainly isn't a bad place to go visit. And I did spend a lot of time there over the past year. But basically, the CEO of the bank said, love it. I've been thinking about ways to expand beyond, Hawaii anyway. It's not a small bank. It's a $7 billion asset bank, a public company called Central Pacific Bank. And so we agreed to basically incubate this idea inside of the bank. And the reason we wanted to do that is, and I'm going to try not to get into too much into the weeds of, how fintech works, but basically all these, new banking apps that you see, behind all of them is a bank. And the fintech company is the technology provider. They operate the brand, but the holder of deposits and the issuer of loans is always a bank, and that's just required by law. But it's super important. If you want to do anything truly disruptive in banking, you have to have a bank partner who is interested in doing interesting, innovative things, and most aren't. And so the method behind the madness of incubating this inside of a bank was, let's solve the hard problem of like developing the right strategy, getting the bank on board, getting regulators on board. It's a huge lift to just get all this stuff sort of cleared with regulators. And then let's spin the company out and we're off to the races. So as of now, we look like any other startup now. In fact, we're going to close our Series A financing here in a couple weeks. And so we'll be just like any other venture-backed fintech startup. The bank is a minority shareholder. We have another strategic partner that's a minority shareholder. We have a private equity fund involved. And so from now on, like, we're completely independent, but we have a very, very close working relationship with the bank, which is really kind of our secret weapon. It's not a glamorous thing to talk about. It's not as cool as like, hey, look at our shiny app. We will have that. But beneath the covers, we've got this really strategic partnership with the bank that was forged by me working inside of the bank for a year, building the relationships, doing the hard work.
Yep. And one more on that, and then we'll get into the fun stuff. But all these other fintech companies that you said have a bank behind them, is it usually the fintech company approaching the bank, or a lot of these being started inside of the bank and spinning out? Like, was there anything unique to this situation, or is it usually, hey, I'm a guy with an idea, I got to go find a bank that'll help me, that'll be my back end partner?
Yeah, it's that. None of these were, they call them neobanks or challenger banks. None of them were incubated inside of a bank. None of them, I mean, I'm being a little extreme here, but none of them really have super strategic bank partnerships. Like, most neobanks work with banks who are in the business of providing a standardized set of banking services to these challenger banks. And so they have basic deposit capability, not much more actually. And that's the big difference, kind of under the covers, between Swell and a lot of these others. I mean, there's also going to be a lot of differences in our feature set, which I can talk about, but under the covers, it's just, I mean, we are, the only neobank that Central Pacific Bank works with is Swell. And we have a team at the bank working on this. We have our own team working on this. So it's a super strategic deal.
Love it. Okay. You had these ideas. You've had years. You were in fintech before it was even called fintech. And that's not a knock on how old you are. It's how long you've been in the business.
Yes.
You've had these ideas.
And also, I'm old.
Well, you're not old. For anybody listening, and we're going to get to that part of the episode, he will run laps around people 20 years younger than him. I would almost put my life on it. He's built a life around staying young and staying, enjoying life despite how we typically look at age. But that's not for right now. We're going to get to that. You have had all these ideas since before fintech was even called fintech. You're coming at this company with a lot of wisdom and a lot of years of just seeing it all. So let's just get into it. What is some of the ideas? What is Swell, and why do you think now's the time?
Yeah. And so this is a great opportunity, Chris, to bring you up to speed, because it's really, I think our strategy has really become a lot sharper over the past few months. And one of the reasons is, and sorry, I'm going to diverge a little bit here, is, you and I spend a lot of time on Twitter, and I've really used Twitter as a sounding board and a testing platform for Swell. So we've got, through my own Twitter account, we've now got about 3,000 people on the Swell waitlist. We don't have a product available yet, but there's 3,000 people that have joined our waitlist, and we use them as a sounding board, and we test ideas all the time. And what's cool is, over the year that we've been incubating this thing, the vision has really, it hasn't so much, like, I wouldn't say it's evolved, but it's gotten a lot sharper. We know what resonates with people. We know what needs are. And so, the basic idea behind Swell is this observation that traditional banks do nothing to help their customers get ahead financially. The exception, of course, is they do a lot for wealthy customers, right? So if you're lucky enough to be wealthy and you have, get private banking services, banks do a lot. They give you access to special deals. They provide very hands-on services, give you access to special products. But for the other 95+% of people, if you think about it, what does your bank do to help you build wealth? I mean, they hold your money, they lend it back to you, not much else. And really, shouldn't that really be the bank's job? Like, help you figure out how to get the most out of your money and how to get ahead. And so that was the core idea. And so we're building Swell around what I call money moves. So, I've been around financial services, as you said, for a long time. And I know all the things that these companies do and that wealthy, smart people do to get ahead. I call them money moves. The idea of Swell is to basically make those money moves available to everyone. So you might say, like, well, what is an example of a money move? So it really just comes down to like the simple things that wealthy people do to get ahead and to stay ahead. So, number one, they tend to spend less than they make, right? And that's a basic principle everybody needs to live by. But frankly, banks and banking apps don't do a lot to help you with that. They don't tend to get themselves in deep debt. They really only use debt as leverage, and we can talk about what that looks like. They use debt as leverage to go buy assets. And then third, they accumulate assets, right? And so, rich people and smart financial brains like to buy assets that generate cash flow or appreciate in value. They don't buy things that depreciate. In fact, it's almost like a sickness. The smartest, wealthiest people I know, like everything they do, they turn it into a money move. And I know you think like this. And really, frankly, like most smart, most people who are really educated in finance and spent, a career in finance like you and I, that's how we think about the world. Whenever we make a big purchase, we're thinking about how does that become an asset? And the thing is, all of these things I talk about scale down for everybody. It's just that people need help doing this. And the financial services industry, historically, the economics haven't made sense. There really hasn't been desire to help regular people make these money moves. So that's the basis, and I'll pause there for a second, but I can talk about how that translates into some of the specific features we're building.
Yeah, I mean, when I think about, and again, I've learned more from you than I probably knew before. When I've thought about a lot of these fintech companies, I almost think of it as like there's a lot of them that are trying to get people to take on more debt. It's like a creative way to take on more credit card debt, or take on more things that are not educating you on how to get richer. Now, there's some good stuff, but the way you've thought about it in the money moves is really what resonated and got me super interested, because you're right. None of these money moves are rocket science. You don't need an 8-year degree from Harvard to understand how to make simple decisions. And so maybe we can go through, like, you have some core tenets of the product. Maybe we can go through like each of them and how you're kind of getting this started. I know there's a big vision, but how will this come out of the gates?
Yeah. And so, where we are right now is we are, and we've been in full scale product development mode for a while. We've got somewhere between 10 and 12 full-time employees now at Swell, depending on who's actually started and who hasn't. We've been hiring like crazy. We've got an extended team at the bank and at another partner company. So, all in, there's probably, the equivalent of 20 plus full-time employees working on this already and have been for a while. It's hard. The thing that's a little frustrating for me as the founder CEO is things never move as fast as you'd like. I mean, it turns out it's hard to build a banking app, right? I mean, you can't screw things up. You're dealing with people's money. So you have to get everything right. You have to get the basics right. And then you start building on top of that. But I'll tell you that the features that we're launching with, there's 3 of them. We call them cash, credit, and compound. And so I'll walk through each of them and kind of tell you what they are, and then kind of it'll be clear, I think, how they kind of map into those tenets we talked about. So cash is your basic checking account. So it's a no fee account. It pays a high APY, like 10 or 20 times what a big bank would pay you on your balances. It's a nominal interest rate. There's no overdrafts. Overdraft is the dirty little secret in banking. That's getting a lot of publicity these days. It's like $30 billion are paid in overdraft fees every year. There's no overdraft. I'll talk about how we handle, negative cash transactions in a second. But it's just, I think of it as like our cash is our checking account that's as good as anything you'll find anywhere from any bank. The next product is credit. So Swell Credit is a line of credit that's integrated into the cash account. So one cool thing right off the bat is our cash and credit product, money moves back and forth seamlessly and instantly between the two. And it allows you to do lots of cool things. But the basic idea behind credit is you can transfer in your credit card balances and your personal loans. We'll give you a lower rate, but we also look for ways to rearrange your debt to pay it off faster. Because the reality is, as I said, rich people don't have a bunch of credit card debt. And really, you should only use debt, as I said earlier, to buy assets, ideally. Now, lots of Americans have credit card debt, personal loans, and so on. So let's figure out a way to help you optimize those and get those paid off faster. And you made a great point, Chris, which is that the industry, obviously, I mean, credit providers make money by extending credit, not by helping you pay it off. And so you see, like, the most recent craze is like buy now, pay later.
Oh
At every
gosh.
checkout, you can make payments on everything. It's crazy. And it is super, super dangerous. It's just going to drive total credit in the US up. In fact, I just saw an announcement the other day, like we had a huge surge in the past year in consumer credits back over $4 trillion. And so we happen to believe that, and we're thinking about the customer holistically. I happen to believe that, doing the right thing for the customer, you're going to have plenty of business. It turns out banks have lots of ways to make money. Banks, even though most big banks are pretty bloated, they still have really great profit margins. So there's lots of ways for us to make money and do right by our customers. And this sort of ties into this idea that, for me, I mean, at this stage in my career, I don't have to be doing this. A big part of me doing this is just because this is a personal mission of mine. I really find it, as you know, I came from pretty humble beginnings, and I find it just frankly offensive the way that the financial services industry treats middle American customers. And I would define that as, anybody that's not in the top 5% probably just doesn't have access to a lot of this stuff. And frankly, people just don't understand financial services, nor should they have to. It's complex stuff. So anyway, that's credit. And then the last piece is last thing on credit is, I mentioned that the cash account, our checking account, doesn't have an overdraft. So we don't hit you with $30 or $40 overdraft fees. What happens is, if you turn this feature on, if you go below zero on your checking account balance, it just gets added immediately to your line of credit at a fair rate. Now, you can turn that on or off depending on if you want to use it or not. But that feature alone will save lots of Americans tons of money, because the effective APR on an overdraft charge is something like 3,000%, depending on how you calculate it. We're going to be offering, a fair rate on credit. So you can just pay it off when you can. And then the last feature, and the one that has really gotten all the buzz so far, it's my favorite, is compound. And this is where something that a thing or two about, compounding in general. And then the basic idea behind compound is that most people in America don't have access to the best private market investments. And I'm specifically talking about things like real estate. I mean, it's no secret that historically real estate has been arguably the best asset class to invest in if you're a long-term compounder. I'm preaching to the choir here. You know a thing or two about this. And as you know, Chris, like all of your investors are accredited, meaning basically that they're millionaires, and you have minimum investments. Typical GP has a minimum investment of $100,000, sometimes more. But these deals are the ones that you want to be in, because, it's been nuts, of course, for the past couple years, but even historically over decades, these asset classes within real estate, whether it be industrial, multifamily, whatever, they've performed incredibly well. It's just that most people don't know this world even exists. And even if they did know it existed, they're not accredited, or they don't have the minimum to invest. So what Swell Compound is doing is democratizing. So we're going to get our customers through something called a Reg A plus fund. We're going to get our customers into the best private market real estate deals out there. We've already identified our first. We're in the process of filing with the SEC to create this fund. And it kind of gives me chills when I think about it, to be honest, because our Swell customers will be able to invest alongside the big guys with as little as $1,000. So it's truly a game changer, and it's understandable. That's the thing that's gotten all the buzz as we've sort of tested these things. It truly is disruptive, and I cannot wait to get that thing launched.
Oh my gosh. I'm getting some chills. There's some notes I wrote down. One's just a conversation. I was either having it with you or somebody the other day, but they said when JP Morgan takes you to to like a golf tournament or a box at some game, you're really taking JP Morgan to
Right.
to that game. There is a lot of money in banking. And I was just going to see if you could maybe riff on that for a second. How do the banks that we think about, the Bank of Americas, the Wells Fargos, a lot of the folks that are banking this customer that you're going after, how are they making money right now in maybe not some of the most obvious ways?
Yeah. Well, I mean, the core revenue source for a bank is the interest margin that they earn on deposits, right? So, I mean, the beauty of a bank is like we all give them our money. The government basically guarantees that those deposits are safe, and so banks have access to money that costs nothing to them, and then they lend it out and they earn a spread on that. And guess what? It turns out it's at scale. That's a really, really profitable business. And then you add to that, all the many fee-based businesses that banks do. It's everything from like basic fees on accounts. There's millions of Americans are paying monthly fees just to have a checking account. There's the $30 billion in overdraft charges that I mentioned. There's investment services, and it just goes on and on and on. Insurance, and I mean all the things that your bank hits you up for all the time. They make money on all of those things, and it's a fat margin business. I mean, I will tell you that especially the big banks, aren't particularly lean companies. Like they're pretty bloated. I mean, they have these huge branch networks, tens of thousands of employees, and they still crank out 25% net margins year after year. So you don't have to worry about your banker making money. You should worry about yourself, like you said. Like you're paying for all this stuff, and the good news is fintech is going after that. Like I think it's a $1 trillion market just in the U.S. Banking is, and that's in revenue. And fintech is a rounding error right now, but there's a big sea change happening, and I hope to be a big part of it.
Yep. Are 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 the big banks in general are they thinking about this? Are they going to be the kind of the ships that's too hard to steer them and change directions? Like they have to see this coming, or is what you said? It's like fintech's small right now, but it's compounding so quick that like it's going to seem like nothing until it's everything. Like I'm kind of asking, like 10 years from now, how do you see the climate for just the banking industry in general?
Yeah, it's tough, right? Because it's hard to cannibalize your business.
Right.
And look, the banks have a lot of moats, right? So they've got longstanding customer relationships, they've got scale, they've got lots of dry powder. They can acquire companies. So it's not like I'm not crazy enough to say like the Wells Fargos of the world are going away, but they're gonna. It's like death through a thousand cuts, because what's happening in fintech and in neobanking is the neobanks like Swell are going after very specific market segments, and we're building products to serve the unique needs of those market segments. And that's really hard for a big scale bank to compete with, because you've got 1,000 of these neobanks. Like there's a bank out there that's being built around the specific needs of doctors, right? And they'll do they know how to lend specifically in the way that doctors need, and they build accounts. I just saw Ramp, which is one of the small business banking neobanks, just launched a feature a couple days ago where you can basically just upload your bills to them, and they'll take the burden of renegotiating to get you better prices on everything. Like, how does Wells Fargo even begin to compete with that at scale? And so we have yet to see the real wave of innovation in neobanking and in consumer banking, but it's coming. And again, I hope to be a part of that. We define our target segment as, we call them strivers. So it's people. It cuts across really all ages, all demographics, but it's people who have this mindset of, I'm not wealthy yet, but I want to get ahead. I'm willing to do the work. I need help. And we're making, like, as you said, it's not rocket science. We're making these money moves as I say, one click easy.
Right. How big, how, like, just in America alone, how many folks do you think fall into your kind of addressable market, kind of as you see it now?
Well, I jokingly refer to it as the other 95% of the market. Like, it's like, I mean, it's honestly, it's most people. And, that's a little bit of an exaggeration, but like, one of the things we looked at, here's a good example. So we looked at, because we're launching this credit product and we're going to have a kind of a unique ability. There's a lot of nuances to what we're doing at Swell, and I won't get into all of them, but here's just one example. So we will have kind of a unique ability to lend to non-prime consumers, so people who are near prime consumers. If you're a prime consumer, you've got no shortage of credit available to you. If you're prime or super prime, like it's the fintechs, it's the banks, everybody's willing to lend to you. If you're just outside of that, so you're a credit-worthy person, but you're just outside of that highest credit score, you are credit constrained. So we did a data study with TransUnion, which is one of the big credit bureaus, and we found that there were about 30 million adults in the U.S. who are credit constrained, which we defined as having less than $2,000 in credit available to them across all of their different credit products. So, you can imagine, I'm not going to give away too many secrets here, but you can imagine, we come in with a $5,000 line of credit at a lower rate, and that's pretty compelling to 20 or 30 million consumers. And that's an example of one entry point into Swell is if there's a credit need that we can solve for you in a better way, that's a great way to get established with a Swell account. Another way is if you're interested, like I mentioned, the compound product, if you're interested in getting into some of these exclusive private market deals and you want to start with a small amount of money, that's another way into the Swell ecosystem.
Yep. A buddy of mine that was in microfinance, for a long time, he told me like 10 years ago, and I've never forgotten about it. And it relates to what you just said. But he asked me, he said, do you know the number one thing that makes countries come out of poverty and start to become competitive in the world? And at first, I was like, I don't know, running water, electricity, and those are certainly you have to have those. But he said, no, it's affordable credit. He said, when you're in some of these places in other parts of the world where your interest rates are 100% and you can only get very little of it, it's very hard to get ahead. And we sit here in America, especially the 5% that you're talking about, that's borrowing, almost however much you want at 2 and 3%. And then I would imagine, even asking myself right now, like, what if one of those loans was at like 10%? On our end, I'd be like, I don't know how you'd make it work. 10% in other parts of the world, and for a lot of our country, call it that 90, is a dream.
Oh yeah. It's easy to forget for those of us, kind of in the bubble, that the average APR on a credit card in this country is around 18%. And so like you said, you and I have access to all the credit we want. In fact, we use credit in clever ways, like to avoid taxes, right? So we'll take a loan out against an asset so we don't have to pay gains on that asset. And we take credit out at really low rates. Regular working Americans can use those strategies. They just need the tools, and they need it to be one click easy because they don't have private bankers or financial advisors to help them make those moves.
Yep. And I know you're not you may or may not know this, but do you know why the average American has a poor credit score? Is it because of just not having credit? A lot of people are like, I don't have a credit score because I just don't have credit. Or is it usually they missed a bill or two or something? Like, what causes the average American in that 95% to have less than stellar credit?
Yeah. Well, I think on the it's different for different segments. If you're talking about like the subprime end of the spectrum, the truly low credit scores, it's typically that they haven't been regular payers on previous credit, and that'll drop your credit score quickly. And then it's the spectrum, right? It's like, maybe if you've missed one payment 3 years ago, you're still not going to be probably in the prime range because banks and credit card companies and home lenders, all credit providers have really tightened up their underwriting. And so they're really focused on, prime and super prime. So if anything has happened that causes you to fall just out of that, it really is pretty binary. Like it's kind of like you either have access to all the credit you want at great prices, or you have access to no credit or credit at terrible prices. There's not a lot of in between. And we're kind of feeling that, in some ways, filling that in between gap.
The democratization of capital. That's I think where you and I first kind of started our bromance. I have seen it coming for a long time, even in my little slice of the world. Even with the folks that can write the $100,000 check, it wasn't too long ago that even the folks that could write $100,000 check couldn't get into deals. Now you've seen crowdfunding, you've seen these softwares like Juniper Square and a lot of things that make it very easy to offer deals to a lot of people, make it very easy to sign documents. And now we're taking it a step further and saying, now the folks with $1,000 can get into this stuff. So let's spend a little more time on, I know you said you're setting up I believe you called it a Regulation A or let's just talk a little bit more. How will that product work? And if, this audience is almost all real estate people, or it's a lot of real estate people, what can they expect? How do they get in touch with you? What will that relationship look like?
Yeah. So, the basic structure is, this legislation, I believe, was part of the Patriot Act from like 2015. And some people refer to it as crowdfunding legislation. And there's a lot of businesses out there that were built, like a lot of like Start Engine and some of these others that help startups raise equity. They use these vehicles to do it. There's companies out there doing stuff in real estate, although it's not really packaged in a way that's easy to understand and easy to take advantage of. And I think what our special sauce is a little bit at Swell is it's all part of, like, when you sign up for Swell, it's one account. You get everything. And if you want to put $1,000 into Swell Compound, it's literally going to be a click of a button. So it's dead simple. And to a certain degree, our customer doesn't want to read a 150-page, offering memorandum. They just want to know that they're investing alongside the big boys. And so I'll give you an example. So I can't talk a lot about much of the detail, but the first deal that we've kind of lined up is with a multifamily operator who you would know in your neck of the woods, who has just an incredible track record. They're putting together something new that requires a $500,000 minimum investment, and it's going to be a big deal. And that's the deal we have in mind as our first one to go for Swell Compound. And it's perfect in a number of ways. I'm super excited about it, but it's just a great example of something like your average American, or even your above average, your high earner, that they couldn't get into something like this for a whole bunch of reasons. One, they wouldn't know about it or have the connections. Two, they may not be accredited. Three, who has $500,000 sitting around to just throw into one investment? And so, democratizing, that's really exciting. And, I'll tell you that for our second one, there's another firm in Dallas Fort Worth called Fort Capital.
Yeah.
And they're doing some really interesting things. I'm just looking, if I only had a connection there, I think we could do something together. I think they'd really like this.
Let me call around and see if I can find somebody. So you meet Fort Capital, or you meet X, Y, and Z company. Swell is going to find, again, why I love this product. Y'all are going to find the tier one GPs. Not the Blackstones of the world and the institutional, but the lower middle market guys that have been offering family offices, small institutions and super high net worth individuals deals for as long as we can remember. Swell's going to go in, meet those people, do the due diligence on the GP, make sure they're legit and honest and have a track record. Then you're going to make the commitment to the deal. And then if I'm on the Swell app and I see that, Fort Capital has a deal, or, whatever that might be, and I'm interested, I'm going to click a button. I can make an allocation into that partnership that you've already created, and frictionless, I can sign almost immediately. You pull my money out of my account and I'm in a deal.
That's exactly right. And so on the flip side, that's exactly how it works for the consumer. On the flip side, to the GP, we look like one huge LP check. So we look like a $20 million check or something. And so, for obvious reasons, that's pretty attractive to some GPs, especially in a world where, GPs are starting to think about, scale. All these markets are becoming hot. I mean, industrial, multifamily, whatever. I mean, there's lots of ranting on Twitter about cap rate compression and everything. And so like a lot of GPs are just thinking about, maybe I just move more toward a scale model. And, so we look pretty attractive. And, so my pitch to GPs is basically like, look, if you're going to make some big plays, some big acquisitions, give us we'll commit to a pretty healthy chunk of each one. And then you've got a percentage of your capital committed already.
Yep. It's legal. The legislation's been there. What needed to be added and what's being added, and obviously what Swell's bringing is the technology makes it frictionless and cuts out a lot of the folks that would have been taking, the big thing around the folks that always had $1,000 to invest was to even get that dollar invested. There was fees upon fees upon fees to by the time it was in a deal, you were already 80 cents on the dollar. That doesn't exist anymore. You're kind of getting in the same way somebody with $1 million would get in.
Yeah. And I think there's a couple things like there's nothing new under the sun. These things like it's all in how you mix and match and put things together. And we're putting things together in a way that hasn't been done, which is a way that is approachable for your average American. Like, because even if you look at like Fundrise, which is an amazing company, they're killing it. It's a pretty wonky product. Like you kind of gotta understand what you're doing to participate in it. And Swell is for the person who wants to get in that sort of investment, or even better, because we are going kind of middle market, and not have to understand all the details. And one of the things I'm going to do, at least early on, is like I'm literally personally investing in every deal we do. So like I'm putting my money where my mouth is as the CEO of Swell. So we're in it together, and I suspect that all of our employees will be participating in Swell Compound as well. And that touches on something that I hadn't mentioned yet, but is actually kind of the core of everything we're doing at Swell, which is Compound is just one example of the power of a bunch of people working together. It's community. So we've already got 3,000 people in our Swell community. There's going to be a whole lot more soon. And think about all the cool things you can do if you work together. And this even ties into, the Web3, the DAOs, and all this stuff happening where you're seeing people trying to buy the Constitution, trying to buy golf courses, trying to like all this crazy stuff. That really is just the power of community working together to make money moves.
Is there going to be a social component to Swell eventually? Besides, you talked about the democratization, but will I know who other customers are? Is there any value to that?
Yeah, I mean, this idea that banks, like let's take a big bank that has 1 million customers. They have individual relationships with every single one of those customers, and they don't actually want there to be any intermingling. We actually want to foster the idea of customers working together. In fact, one of the primary ways we plan on marketing Swell is through our customers, like content. And this whole idea of a lot of what we see and what you and I do on Twitter every day is, and other platforms as well, is this thing gets more powerful the more people are involved. And some of the stuff we have on the drawing board, which given what we're gonna announce here in a little bit, you'll have insight into, is really cool. Like this is really just the beginning. Like we're doing the basics, and look, as the founder CEO, like it can't move fast enough for me. I want to get to all the cool stuff. Just to be really honest, we've got a lot of stuff to build. We're not going to have a product in market until Q2 of this year. So we're heads down building right now. And so what we're asking are people who sign up for our wait list, we're asking them to take the journey with us, and they're part of Swell. Like in many ways, Swell is its community. Like that is the product, and we're building all this stuff around that.
If somebody's listening and wants to get on that wait list, how do they do it? How do they just get it, in the ecosystem?
Yeah, go to swellmoney.com. It's literally just our logo and a button to sign up for our wait list, or you can go to my Twitter bio. There's a link in there too. But yeah, I encourage everybody to sign up. I mean, if nothing else, you'll get kind of the latest updates and early access to Swell, because we won't be able to roll it out to everybody on the wait list from day one. It'll have to be a phased rollout, but I personally invite everybody to come along with us on the journey.
Yep. Well, I started out the conversation this way. I've traveled twice to meet folks that I've met over the internet. And the first time I ever did that was to meet you. We've had so many chats about this. And I'm just very passionate in general about the bank, just the finance system in general. I think, like you said, these are not, you do not need a degree from Harvard to know basic finance skills. And understanding basic finance skills can not only change your life, but it can change your entire family for generations' life. I've been doing in my very, very small part on the real estate side of opening up what I would consider institutional quality deals to more and more folks. But when I heard what you were doing and bringing in even more folks, it was passionate. And so I'm really excited to be a customer. I'm also excited to possibly work with you. You want to talk about what we've been talking about?
Yeah. So I guess the big announcement is that Chris has agreed to join the board of directors for Swell, which I am beyond excited about, just because you and I have had many lengthy conversations all over the country about these ideas, and I know your passion. And obviously, on the real estate private equity side, you're one of the best there is. So, and I will tell you, I'm going to brag a little bit just about kind of the board we've got. I mean, I am so excited about the board we've put together. It's a bunch of killers, and just to give you the breakdown, I haven't released the details yet, but there's 3 public company CEOs who are all CEOs of financial services companies. There's the managing director of a fintech private equity fund. There's you, who's the founder of a real estate private equity fund. It's myself, and then a chief strategy officer at a fintech company. And so, these were very deliberate choices, because every single person on our board brings something meaningful that maps directly into one of the things I've talked about today. I mean, obviously, in your case, Compound, doing these real estate deals, there's no better partner to have help me think through this stuff than you. So first of all, thank you for joining, and I'm super excited.
I am so excited. I'm a little nervous. The board is unbelievable, but I do feel like with the experience in real estate, and really just the passion for wanting to, I think the way that money is talked about in this country, in certain circles, it can either make your life, and then the rest of the world, it can destroy your life. I just think there's a lot of opportunity here, and I couldn't be more excited to be a part of it. Like I said, I'm nervous for that first meeting. I'm going to walk into a room full of giants.
I know, and I got to deliver for these giants. And I will say the other thing is, I'm actually writing a letter that I'm going to send out to you guys to schedule the first board meeting. And one of the things I say in the letter is, I know every single person on the board personally, and not only are they killers in the business world, but more importantly, they're good human beings. And these are people who actually, like you, care about helping everybody come along and be prosperous and take advantage of the best that our financial system has to offer.
Yep. Oh, I'm so excited. Well, thank you again. Now we're going to get into a fun part of the conversation. We're going to do a little back and forth here on some hot topics. You have been building this company remotely to date. I have never been a part of something remote. And I'll start by saying I'm not against remote. I totally agree with it. And for certain industries, it works. But I had a tweet yesterday that kind of started with the office is really important. And then there was somebody that chimed in that I think it was Girdley, and he basically said, when you work remote, I met this guy, and he says he works full time, but he only works a few hours a week. And you said that has everything to do with culture and management and leadership. So let's just kind of start out with, you've been remote for a long time. Why do you believe in it? And where do things go wrong remote, and where do they go really right in remote?
Yeah, it's a great question. I mean, look, there's a lot of extreme hot takes on Twitter and elsewhere. Reality, as usual, is somewhere in between. And by the way, full disclosure, I'm probably more of an extremist than most, because I was working remote before remote was cool, or before we all got forced to do it. But the first thing I want to say is, at the end of the day, let's just recognize that our opinions don't matter. Really, workers will decide. And one of the cool things I think that's happening that happened through the pandemic is power started to shift toward the workers, especially knowledge workers. If you want to hire the best people, then you need to provide the environment and the culture that they demand. And so, my observation is that younger people, there's pros and cons, obviously, to being all gathered in one place versus being distributed or something in between. But I think in general, when you look at when you list out the pros and cons, younger people are going to bias pretty heavily toward the remote world. And the example I like to use is my 14-year-old. She's online, for me as a parent, an embarrassing number of hours a day. But in many ways, I'm okay with that, because guess what? That's the world we live in. And so my daughter, Allie, has closer friends on Discord on the gaming servers than she does in real life. And actually, I'm okay with that. I try to think we should embrace that, because that is the way the world's going. And so, I think the pandemic obviously created an inflection point on something that was already happening. And I think there is a lot of people who are just unwilling to go back to the office. And, the other thing I always say is, remember, it's early days. You and I are using Zencaster right now to do this podcast. We use Zoom for meetings. We will look back in 10 years and laugh at these tools. They're so primitive, and the voice cuts out, the video gets blurry occasionally. It's a tiny little screen. I'll tell you, I had a glimpse of the future, and I'm probably behind the curve on this actually, but Ryan, our CTO at Swell, he had this idea, hey, let's buy Oculus headsets for all of our employees. That'll be a nice welcome aboard, welcome package thing. And so we're getting every employee at Swell gets an Oculus headset, and I got to try one. And I had tried one when it first came out, and it was super clunky. It had to be connected to a PC, and it just wasn't great. Dude, I don't know if you've tried one recently. It's insane. When you put that headset on, you feel like you're in a different world. They had I had a meeting room set up on the bridge of the Starship Enterprise, and it feels like you're there. And so again, it's early days. I think that the technologies, there's going to be it's going to seem, this is pretty extreme hot take, but it's going to seem in some ways, I think, silly a few years from now that we had centralized offices where we all used to drive an hour to meet.
You're just poking. You're just poking.
I'm poking the bear.
No, you know what? I'm always, I would start by saying, I think it's smart to always keep an open mind.
Yeah.
And I'm not going to close the door on this. So my challenge is, and maybe it's industry specific. A lot of real estate is forward facing. You feel it, see it, touch it. And a lot of people you're just in real estate. That's why you care about the office. But what I would tell you, and this is where I think you were headed, and I think what this is really teaching us is you can't have a shitty culture anymore.
That's right.
You can't have a company that has people come to your office and you treat them mediocre. They do have the power. I might just be so jaded, and I don't say this because, I live in the clouds, and I couldn't keep most of my team home if I tried to keep them home. As soon as the office was available to come back to, we had people begging us to come back before you could come back. Now, I'm not saying that's because Fort Capital is all the rage, but I have heard that in other situations. And I think what we're starting to deal with is you just can't treat people like machines anymore or widgets. You got to treat people like people. So starting there is huge. And so again, we never had, somebody sent me a picture on Twitter the other day, and it was this shitty old room from the 80s, cubicles stacked, just ugly furniture. You could just tell it was just, yeah. If you've been sitting in your home where it's comfortable and you have a couch and And then you got to think about going back to that. So when I think of the office now, it's kind of in two things. Is one, you better have a place that people could enjoy the physical aspects of that office. It feels good. Two, I'm all about hybrid. I do not believe in this world where moms can't leave for a little bit to take the day off to take their kids somewhere or do that. We are in that world. But three, and this is where I get real kind of, I'm a little confused, and we'll see, is I just couldn't imagine graduating college and spending my first day of work in my bedroom and having to be mentored by people through a camera. Because candidly, I love doing this right now on Zencastr because we're having a lot of fun. I can't stand being on Zoom. I personally get drained. And if I had to like spend time training and like mentoring people, I would think, man, that's tough. And so much of my upbringing early on was, it's the things you hear in the hallway and the conversation that you heard that kind of builds this camaraderie. So I've kind of gone on for a while. I'll leave that as, how do you think about training these people and getting people motivated?
Yeah. And by the way, just to show you the full extent of my hypocrisy, I'll tell you a funny story. I've posted a few things on Twitter, like ranting about like remote is the future. One of my enterprising followers did some research and he's like, "Hey, dude, I noticed that you have an office for Swell." And I was like, "Oh, you caught me, dude." So yeah, we have an office at Swell. We're in a co-working facility here in Boulder, and our CTO, our head of design, and one of our senior engineers work there most days. I go in about once a month, and you absolutely need, I think I call them offices on the edge. So I would never have an office for Swell in like a downtown area of a major metro, but like this place we have, it's a co-working facility. It's really cool. It's, I can ride my bike to it. I think that sort of distributed thing is kind of what I view as the future. But you hit on a huge point, which is one thing I observe sometimes is that the guys who are proponents of office work, they're maybe not as progressive as you, like in recognizing like, hey, you got to create a great culture and have a great environment. I'll tell you a funny story. When I got married, my wife worked. She was like a mid-level marketing manager for a big tech company in Dallas. And I never once went to her office. She just went to work every day, came home like everybody else. And eventually when we started to have kids, she stopped working. And I went with her. The first time I ever went to her office was when we went to clean out her cubicle. And I walked into this office and it was like in a basement with a sea of cubicles, yellow light, no natural light. And I felt so awful. I was like, I cannot believe I allowed you to work in this. So I guess the reminder there is like, you have to think about the lowest common denominator. And if you're providing a great environment in the office for everybody, then I think that's awesome. If its executives have kick-ass offices and everybody else has a shitty cubicle, that's not so awesome. And so I think and again, the workers are gaining power. So I think you hit the nail on the head. It's like culture and the environment you work in is part of the culture. And so if you can't provide an awesome environment, awesome culture, you can't compete.
I'm with you. I'm gonna just go through a series of questions. These are more opinions that you can share your opinion, but I'll end on your statement with just saying what I want to see happen before I make I'll be willing to change my mind after a couple things happen. One, I believe that workers don't have as much power right now as they think they do. I think the media has powers over corporate CEOs, and it's a big game of chicken right now of who's coming back first. When I talk to big CEOs off the grid, they're all like, dude, as soon as this thing, we can go back, we are back. Now, they might go back and realize this was all false hope. So that's one. Two, what will be interesting that will create FOMO. If Bank of America goes back, Wells Fargo and JP Morgan are not too far after. The second, which will be interesting, is if your leaders and managers are in an office, you're at a company that is more office centric. We'll see who's getting promoted, whose ideas are being heard, things of that nature. That will naturally create FOMO. And what you might find are people that literally go to a firm because they're in the office, and people that will not touch a firm because it's in an office. But I want to see how FOMO plays out, because it's hard for me to think that the best ideas will surface through a Zoom call. If I think you could have an 8 out of 10 idea and be with the CEO every day and have a better chance of getting it elected than a 10 out of 10 idea, and you haven't seen that person in person for a year. I, again, am an office guy. I've never been remote. Some people listen to this laughing. I just want to see, we're social creatures. I think that what's in the room. It's always been important to be in the room, whether that's now a digital room or in real life.
Yeah.
We'll see.
Yeah, and we'll see. And these things don't change, overnight. And, we're going to see how it plays out. The one thing I'd say is if you're going to work remote, and I think you're right that it will probably bifurcate a little bit. Like there'll be some companies that choose to be office centric and they'll do great. There'll be a lot of companies that choose to be remote first and they'll do great. And workers will choose. What I would say though, like if you're going to go remote, what I found, because I've been doing it for a long time, like way before the pandemic forced it, is the difference is you have to be a little bit more deliberate. Like, so you talk about like the being in the room and the conversations, the brainstorming, like we'll literally schedule blocks of time to do ideation, like to do the big thinking. And personally, I prefer it that way because I like to be deliberate. Like, and if we're going to ideate, let's have a coffee, let's get in a room that's comfortable with a whiteboard and let's ideate. Otherwise, let's not waste any time. Like if we're putting our heads down to create stuff, then we can be remote and, Zoom is fine. So I think you should, and again, like it's early days, the processes will evolve, the technologies will evolve, and we'll see. I think, it's going to be interesting to watch. And I think you're right that it's early in the game. The employees probably don't have the power that they think they do quite yet, but you can imagine that shifting. And one of the more interesting angles is what you mentioned on Twitter, which I thought was an incredible insight around this idea that, well, be careful what you ask for, because guess what? If you're going to be remote, could someone in Philippines or India or whatever do the job just as well as you? And some of that happens already, but really, as you pointed out, knowledge work, most of it has not moved offshore. So that's the globalization aspect.
I love the conversation, and I will say I'll end the remote piece, and then we'll talk globalization for just a second by saying a lot of the flack I get is, and these people don't know me, they have no idea about my business, is you must be some control freak. Well, I would tell you, anybody that actually knows me and works with me, Johnny works with me, I'm about as least of a control freak. It's probably my downside is I'm not detailed enough. I'll put it on the record. If running a fully remote company made our business better, our people better, and we were more profitable, I will sell every office building I ever had. It has nothing to do with that. Now, moving to knowledge workers going overseas, people like to read your tweets and then they interpret your tweets how they think they're reading them, not what they said. My tweet said, I think there's going to be an unintended consequences, and there is a lot of jobs, not all of them. There's some that are always going to be here, and there's going to be opportunities for new jobs that we've never thought of, and blah, blah, blah. But my thing was, if your job can truly be done from a bedroom, it can probably be done from a bedroom in the Philippines or India. We don't have to get into a conversation about what folks are paid over there. Nick Huber laid that out nicely this week, and I'll defend Nick. I'll defend Nick from the standpoint of it's easy to compare what people make in America, but when people are making 300% more than they were making before, even if that just means $5 an hour, their lives are being changed, even though, if we compare that to Americans.
And guess what? It's happening. It's happening. Like there's no, like the floodgates have opened, and we are going to be operating in a global, with a global workforce at our disposal. And that comes with, like, as remote gets better, that really benefits people outside of America in some ways more than people in America.
100%.
And so there's even a more philosophical one that you actually got me thinking when you tweeted that, around like governments will have to start becoming more competitive to attract and retain workers. And our government has in many ways been doing the opposite. But but because there's reasons to live in America right now other than just having a job, right? I mean, this is the best place to live in the world. But will that be less true 10 years from now? Maybe.
I just got done reading a book called The Sovereign Individual, The Coming of the Information, written in 97, that actually makes everything going on in the world today actually seem a lot more normal. It's scary how close, but you're absolutely right. This is going to be global competition. We have 6 full-time employees in India. They're just as smart. They're just as capable. They work while we sleep, and we sleep while they work. And I will tell you this, and I love my team in America, and they know I love them, and they have just as they have so many things that are tangible to American culture. Those folks over in India have more gratitude for the position that they have. It oozes out of them. The emails that I got at the end of the year for the new year from our India team, it just reeks of gratitude and thankfulness. And that is contagious in and of itself. And it feels good as an employer to know that there's these folks out here that you're bringing them out of a world that they've been trapped in for a long time and giving them opportunities they've never had. And that is
Yeah.
contagious and will spread in and of itself.
You're changing families, the trajectory of a family. When someone overseas gets a job, even at half the salary of the same role in the U.S., that changes the trajectory of their whole family,
Yep.
their
So
extended family.
it was fun to chat about it with you. I know we can always have this fun banter, but it really is going to be interesting to see how the world reorients itself over the next decade once whatever post-COVID even will mean, but we can kind of get to a point where we work is not such a point of just total hysteria, which it is right now.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, people like to argue in absolutes, but usually the truth is somewhere in between.
Okay, I'm kind of going through our little list. We've kind of we've gone through everything. Is there anything we left off the table that we need to chat about before we end it?
No, I think this has been as always, a great chat. And look, I guess the big reveal from this one was, and again, thank you for being willing to serve on the Swell board. I could not be more excited about working together in like an official capacity now. So thank you, and thanks for having me on this podcast. It's I always enjoy these and look forward to them.
I could not be more excited. It's the people. The people is what I'm most excited about. The product second. I wouldn't have gotten into this without the team that you've built, without you running it. And candidly, selfishly, I'm going to learn so much. This is a world that I have not been accustomed to, and I look forward to applying value. And thanks for everything.
Likewise.